Welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us yet again. We're doing this daily. We're doing a Major League Baseball update for you guys through this off season. So thank you guys for joining us for our third night in a row of doing this. Still got some more news for you guys, an update on Clayton Kershaw, so stick around for that as well. If you guys are new to the Upside Sports Network, we cover the MLB, NBA, NFL, and the NHL. So we appreciate you guys joining us each and every night. Welcome back, Declan. Yeah, I do really like that intro. It was worth every penny. It wasn't that expensive, but it was worth every penny to get that for you guys. I wanted to boost the profile of the site for you guys, and we'll get back to some long form content videos for you guys as soon as we reach that 1,000 subscriber mark. So if you'd like to see some of that, make sure if you haven't hit that subscribe button already, please do so. It really does help us out. But without further ado, let's kind of get into some of the news and notes from around the world of baseball anyway. First and foremost, Clayton Kershaw. We mentioned last night that he seemed to be nearing a deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now we have a little bit more information on what type of a deal that might end up being. Looks like a one-year deal, probably in the neighborhood of about $17+ million. Might be some incentives on the back end of that deal as well. But there may even be an option year, but $17 million seems to be the ballpark figure anyway for Clayton Kershaw. Now, I told you last night that they were going to go ahead and decline the option on Justin Turner, their third baseman. That option was for $16 million. So basically, they took their money that they had set aside for Justin Turner, minus the buyout money, of course, in order to decline that option, and decided to give that to Clayton Kershaw instead. I think this is a great move for them because I think they're short on pitching to begin with anyway. Of course, Walker Buehler is going to be coming back from injury at some point this season, but you can't really count on him to be the Walker Buehler of old anyway, at least until next season. So we'll see what ends up happening with him. But as far as the rotation, they still have a couple of very good arms already there. Julio Urias was probably their ace last year just because of how the different injuries affected that staff. Tyler Anderson has got the qualifying offer. He probably will end up back in LA this offseason. I wonder if he does accept the qualifying offer because he just had one really good year. Pardon me, his damn allergies. But anyway, he had one really good year so far with the Dodgers, was kind of a middle of the road, back end type of a roster, type of a player anyway for the Dodgers before that. Last year really kind of stepped out, decreased his walk rate, increased his strikeout rate, swing and miss rate was way up as well. Really showed a really advancement in his career, much like Martin Perez of the Texas Rangers. Martin Perez a little bit to a lesser extent because he kind of trailed off a little bit at during the second half of the year. But both pitchers took big steps this year as far as starting pitchers. Both got the qualifying offer. I could see both of them accepting the qualifying offer or working out a short-term type of a deal, 2-3 year deal to stay with their current team. That's kind of what I end up seeing happen for both of those guys. But for those of you wondering what ended up happening with Clayton Kershaw, he's going to sign a 1-year deal to stay with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, for those of you Rangers fans out there thinking, we missed out on yet another free agent starting pitcher, the Rangers were never really that big of a team anyway for Clayton Kershaw. If going into the offseason, as a Rangers fan, optimistically, I would have said we had a 1 in 3 chance that Clayton Kershaw ends up with the Rangers. A bit more than 50% of the chance would be that he goes back to the Dodgers. The small percentage anyway that he might retire, but we saw him get a little stronger as the year went on. We saw him, as far as the pitching, the way he was pitching, he changed up his sequencing, something that could be a little bit more productive for him over the long term of his career. But he was a very good option for the Dodgers last year, and he should be going forward. I think his career is not over after next year either. I think he's going to probably work a few more years in LA and just kind of wrap up his Hall of Fame resume. But that's kind of item number 1 from the MLB offseason so far today. Other news and notes. We didn't get to these last night anyway, but the Rangers made a flurry of moves aside from the Jake Odorizzi trade that they made, that they also got the Braves to pay $10 million of that salary. They cleaned up a lot of their back end of that roster to try to free up roster spots for a lot of the free agents that they're going to bring in this offseason. Nick Solak was sent out of town. Maybridge Valoria was sent out of town. They sent out Tyson Miller as well. There's like 5 or 6, Andy Ibanez as well. They've got a lot of open roster spots now on that 40-man roster, so they should have no trouble being able to field, being able to make an offer to a player or to a team, or excuse me, to a player, or even take on additional contracts from other teams as they try to shed some salary in case they want to make a play for a free agent this offseason. But Rangers made a flurry of moves yesterday. We'll see what they end up doing with those open roster spots. The news today comes from John Paul Morosi anyway, from Fox News, or from Fox Sports anyway, saying that the Rangers obviously are still in at the top of the market for pitching. Most notably, everybody was already talking about Jacob deGrom. Now we have a little bit better link anyway between Carlos Rodon and Senga anyway from the international leagues as well. So the Rangers are definitely going to play at the top of the market for pitching. Outside of that, we've seen a few other moves anyway around Major League Baseball today. A lot of minor moves. The Reds signed a minor league pitcher anyway. A little bit of news anyway from the Dodgers as well is that Blake Trinan, we mentioned that he was only able to pitch 5 innings last year before requiring surgery. Well, now he's going to go through another surgery and will not pitch the entire season in all likelihood. He is going to be out for the year, and don't expect him back in a Dodgers uniform. I just think his time LA is over. One major league signing anyway, the Atlanta Braves have signed Nick Anderson. He was released or sent on waivers anyway by the Tampa Bay Rays. He opted for free agency and immediately signs a deal with the Atlanta Braves. Great job by the Atlanta Braves getting a good reliever in Nick Anderson. I believe they needed to improve that bullpen because they're going to lose Kenley Jansen. I don't think they're going to have the money to be able to keep him around anyway. Another move by the Tampa Bay Rays is they brought on former president of baseball operations from the Texas Rangers in John Daniels as a senior advisor to their GM. Good move for them. I think he's going to be instrumental in helping their organization kind of get some outside perspective in that organization as well. One thing John Daniels has always had affinity for is Tampa Bay Rays players. Now he gets to be a part of that team and see how things really work from the inside, and maybe he'll be better for it for future opportunities. I mentioned earlier that before the season even ended that John Daniels was of interest anyway for the New York Mets president of baseball ops anyway position. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Obviously, now that he's taken the position with the Tampa Bay Rays, but there's still a lot of good names out there for that position. David Stearns from the Milwaukee Brewers, he stepped down. He's now going to be a consultant for the Brewers, at least for the time being. Sounds like he could be of interest to both the Houston Astros and the New York Mets for very similar positions. The news out of the Houston Astros is that their general manager, the guy that was the architect behind this season's team at least, decided not to stick around. Jim Crane, the owner of the Houston Astros, only extended him and Dusty Baker both one-year deals to stick around with the Houston Astros. He believes that that the Houston Astros have created a winning machine, that every single year it's a foregone conclusion that they'll make the postseason, that they'll make the ALCS, and that on the odd year, they'll win the World Series. I just don't think it's that easy. I think a lot of intellectual property is now going out on the market. A lot of reporters from around baseball right now are discussing how exactly James Click is going to take his knowledge that he got, the institutional knowledge that he gained by going to Houston from the Tampa Bay organization, and where he could go with his next opportunity. He's going to be a highly sought-after name for front office openings over the next few years, so kind of keep your eyes peeled where he may go. For the Houston Astros, this makes me wonder what exactly they were wanting to do. Now, I understand James Click didn't really see eye to eye with Jim Crane, especially at the trade deadline when Jim Crane really wanted to get in catcher Wilson Contreras. Obviously, things worked out, and the GM made the right call, did enough to get the team through the World Series. Got a good offensive catcher in Christian Vazquez as well. I wonder if the Cubs' price was a little bit too high, is why they balked at the Wilson Contreras signing. Of course, we saw they opted for a defensive catcher in Martin Maldonado, even after the acquisition of Vazquez. Tells me all the more that Contreras would have been more of a DH, starts every fifth day kind of a thing at catcher if he had been traded to Houston. That tells me more about the divide between owner and GM more than anything else, in addition to the one-year deal. I think Click thought that the one-year deal is kind of a slap in the face for all he had done, winning them a World Series. Now, you could say that the Houston Astros already had something going, that he was just kind of steering the all he had to do was keep the train on the track anyway, and that kind of a thing. Welcome back, Giants fan. But I wouldn't be so quick to judge James Click's performance, especially when you consider the additions that he made to that roster that helped get them to where they were. Trey Mancini, Aledmus Diaz, starting rotation anyway, being able to keep around a guy like Justin Verlander, bringing in a guy like Jake Odorizzi to pitch well for them in the first half of the season, while they had to get Lance McCullers healthy in the second half of the season. Those are the type of moves he was able to do, and by the way, he was able to rebuild a lot of that bullpen by himself. So great job, James Click. I'm just a little bit surprised that the Houston Astros are just going to let him walk just because the owner and GM don't really see eye to eye about a couple of different issues. And I'm a little bit surprised that Jim Crane, the hubris that he has as far as how he views that position, how he views his team as just being able to, run this thing through, take the AL West every single year. The AL West is going to be very competitive next year. The Mariners showed you that they're an up-and-coming team. They have a very solid rotation, just as good, if not better, than the Houston Astros next year. Remember, Justin Verlander is going to be a year older, and he's a free agent right now. I wonder how much it's going to cost the Houston Astros to keep him around. I'm thinking it's going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 to $40 million. I don't think it's going to cost 25, and it's going to probably be a 2, maybe even a 3-year deal to get him to stay there. I think he ultimately does end up staying in Houston. But that rotation, they do have really good options. Framber Valdez, Christian Javier. They didn't even use Jose Urquidy in that playoff series as well. They have Lance McCullers, even though he got blown up in Game 2. They still have a very good rotation. But the Mariners are going to be right there. I expect Robbie Ray to have a better performance next season for the Mariners, kind of adjusting to the city of Seattle again. Luis Castillo, full season of him there. They also have 2 up-and-coming young pitchers as well, Kirby, and I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head, but the Mariners have a rotation that's coming. They're as far as their position players. They could even add a shortstop to this team, even though they have a decent option in J.P. Crawford there. They've already said he's going to be the starter, but that they're still looking at improvements. And Jerry Dipoto is known to make a ton of trades. He's been willing to do pretty much anything to improve this team. They have the AL Rookie of the Year, in my opinion, in Julio Rodriguez. We'll see if he wins that award next week. But for my money, the Mariners are going to be right there. Now, the Texas Rangers have an organizational mandate to win, or to at least make the postseason. Not saying they'll win the division, but I think there's a better case for them to be able to make the postseason if they get better starting pitching. They're looking at the top end of the starting market right now. Carlos Rodon and Jacob deGrom. I think they'll get one of those two. If they go with Rodon, I think they bring back Perez, and I think they might even go after Senga and then still try to bring in a closer and a left fielder. Those are the holes I think they could go for. Now, if they go for the route of Jacob deGrom, maybe they bring in only one more pitcher, allow some of their younger guys to fill a hole at the back end of the staff again, and then try to build out from there and maybe bring in a closer as well. Maybe a guy like Kenley Jansen for about $10 to $12 million on a 2 to 3 year deal. Something like that could be in the offing for the Rangers as they try to improve their bullpen. But there's a lot of ways that this offseason could unfold, and the Houston Astros just to allow James Click anyway just to walk out the door and not really have a backup plan or contingency plan in place. They fired his assistant GM Powers as well. So a lot of turmoil for a World Series winning team already. They already cleaned out their first base position by declining the option on Trey Mancini. Yuli Gurriel is going to be a free agent as well. They could improve their first base spot by bringing in a guy like Jose Abreu or a Josh Bell, something like that. But I don't think it's going to be just that easy just to kind of go plug and play a new GM and, hopefully pushes all the right buttons at the right times as to say who makes the team, who doesn't, when those how the spreadsheets kind of work anyway nowadays in Major League Baseball, how the advanced analytics say use this pitcher against this batter, use them for this long against, with this type of velocity, and if he starts losing velocity, then he goes, with a different, person, something like that. Those type of tables, while they're still going to be there for Houston, they might be deployed differently by a different general manager, and that's what I wonder if Houston might be mistaking here by allowing James Click to go out the door. They've lost a couple of GMs now in the past few years, Luno and now Click. We'll see who ends up going into that spot, especially now that they understand Jim Crane, the owner, is the one really kind of pulling levers right now, especially at the top end of the organization. A lot of pressure on that GM spot. We'll see if somebody's willing to go in there. Remember all the acrimony that was around the Dallas Cowboys and the NFL, how he was kind of meddling in everything the team was doing, from the head coach to being the GM to being the guy that picks out the talent. He's kind of differentiated all those different roles now in that franchise anyway. His son, Stephen Jones, kind of operates as kind of as the operational head of the organization nowadays. Mike McCarthy still has a big input on what happens on game day. Will McClay has a big role as far as draft. So this organization for the Dallas Cowboys has gotten a lot more coherent in recent years anyway. That's why they've had sustained success anyway for the past 10 years or so, because Jerry's kind of taken a step back. Well, Jim Crane of the Houston Astros is doing the exact opposite with the Houston Astros organization. 6 straight years he's made it to the ALCS, so I understand he feels like he has somewhat of a hand in this, especially after cleaning house after the cheating scandal that they had a few years ago. But it's still roughly the same roster, so I can understand how he might feel a certain entitlement that this roster should still be able to make the playoffs and be able to make the ALCS. I can get that argument if I'm Jim Crane. But you're letting a lot of knowledge go out of the building. You're letting a lot of opportunity pass you by. And just to say somebody else, random person off the street can do the same job that he did, I think is way beyond what anybody else would consider as fair to either one of those people in the organization, Powers or Click. We'll see what ends up happening there, but for my money, I think it's a little bit of a mistake here by Jim Crane. We'll see who they end up bringing in. David Stearns from the Milwaukee Brewers is a name that's been mentioned because he's worked with the organization before. I think he wants no part of that organization, especially with a meddlesome owner like Jim Crane being there. But other news from around baseball, not too much going on. Just want to kind of update you on the contract of Nick Anderson. Looks like it will be a small deal anyway. Could be a split-level deal. Looks like just beneath $1 million. He's 32 years old, pitched about 81 innings over 2 years anyway. Had a UCL tear in spring training of 21. Didn't return until August of this past year. So that's kind of your update for at least an outside signing. Welcome back, Anthony. Saw Baltimore Orioles get Pablo Lopez, Dylan Florio, Jake Easer. Marlins gets... Okay, let's look it up. Let me pull that screen up for you guys so you guys can see where I'm looking. We'll use this one. Go back, wrong one. That one. All right, so the Orioles is who you're saying they would make this trade with. I don't think that's a great trade for the Orioles because I think they still need to keep their talent in house, and I can understand the argument to bring in pitching help, but I don't think that's the right move. I think they need to go for the free agent market rather than sell some of their pieces. All right, so one of the pieces you mentioned here was Colton Cowser. He's a AAA outfielder, projected to probably make the big leagues probably within the next year. Let's look at some of his numbers anyway. Last year at AA, hitting .341, good. Struggled at AAA in his first taste of it. Not too surprising. Doesn't strike out a ton. That's good. OPS numbers were good at AA anyway. AA's routinely been kind of the test of AA anyway for both pitchers and hitters anyway. If they can get past the AA level, that's when you really have something on your hand or something going for you. If you have a younger player who's able to excel at that level, if they wait until they're age 25, 26 to finally have success at the AA level, that's when you have more of a bust. But Colton Cowser looks like he tore it up at AA, struggled in AAA. I'd like to see him perform a little bit better. I'm not sure if that's the headliner piece that that would be a good trade for them. You say Colby Mayo as well, number 7 prospect here. Orioles do have a really good system anyway. AA last year hit about 250, about what he hit in high A. Not exactly a high ceiling though, in my opinion. Looks like his power is the real thing there. 60 power tool, 45 hit, great arm as well. And you say the third piece that they would get was Houston Kierstead. So they get 3 of the top 10 from Baltimore. So it looks like that's more of a quantity over quality type of package, it looks like. Another power guy. And you don't get a pitcher back in the deal? I don't think that would work. So to kind of answer for this type of a trade, I would say no if I'm the Marlins, just because the composition of the trade doesn't look right. The value may or may not be there, but I don't like the composition of that type of a trade. Nobody in that group is at least a marginal or guaranteed marginally good MLB player. If I'm looking at Colton Cowser, he had good AAA number or AA numbers, but I would wonder about his effectiveness to stay, and I certainly would want a pitcher out of it as well. Oh, let me see. Let me fix the screen grab. I just noticed that. My bad. There we go. Well, you've been able to produce successful corner outfielders before, though. That's never been your issue. You do have Jorge Soler, who's going to be there for a couple more years. So while these are prospects, you need somebody to eventually fill those spots. I understand that. You've had a really nice job of producing starting pitching, but some of it started to falter a little bit. I still would want at least a pitching prospect back. I'm not saying the whole package has to be a pitching prospect but if I'm giving up a controllable starting pitcher, I want at least a pitcher back that I can at least look at as a possibility. Not saying it even has to be the top 1 or 2 piece, but I want a pitcher back. Colton Cowser could be a nice piece at the top of that offer, but again, I just don't see the Orioles being a good option for Pablo Lopez trades. I could be wrong, but I just don't think it's the time to invest in that if I'm an Orioles fan. I would be looking again more towards free agents that are in that $10 to $12 million in average annual value. Maybe a guy like Jameson Taillon might make some sense. Something like that to kind of get you through until your team is ready to win next year. I think they played a little bit above their heads with Adley Rutschman this year, kind of playing at an MVP level in the second half of the season. But the rest of the roster just isn't there to be able to compete at that level. Shortstop, they still got a lot of youth at that spot. Gunnar Henderson coming up. Jackson Holliday's probably a year away. But a lot of their prospects are ready to hit the major league level Not next year, but the following. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But I don't think that would be the type of package I would accept if I were part of the Marlins front office. I'd be looking for either a more premium prospect to headline the deal, and less or and more, depth, prospects in that 20 to 25 range, kind of a lottery ticket, if I will, or if you will, anyway, as opposed to three middling type of prospects. Well, even still, say you know just those two prospects. Just say they're both great, or at least one of them makes the major leagues, and it has any level of consistency. They could both hit and be great, but the record or the track record for starting pitchers making it to the major leagues and ultimately being an impactful starting pitcher are slim. Just look at Jack Leiter when he came into the draft anyway, was a number 2 overall pick anyway by the Texas Rangers. Still looks like he's going to be a fantastic pitcher, but has his struggles anyway at the AA and AAA level last year. Not saying he can't ever become a great pitcher, but he's still viewed as a top 100 prospect, top 50 prospect in the game. They still think he's a future ace in Major League Baseball. But again, the success rate of starting pitchers making it all the way is not that great. And so I would at least want another lottery ticket added, especially if I'm giving up a guy who's proven to be successful and is on a controllable level deal. I would either want a higher level prospect like one of those top 3 prospects from the Orioles system. I don't think you'd get one because the Orioles value those top 3 really highly. But that's why, again, I don't think the Orioles are the best fit. There's other organizations that would work a little bit better. We talked a little bit about the Yankees organization yesterday. There's other organizations that are going to be out there looking for starting pitching. We've talked a lot about the Texas Rangers adding somebody as far as a starting pitcher via free agency, but they have a lot of trade candidates in their upper minors and the top or young starting pitchers already on their roster. They could trade from their depth as well, as far as the top or as far as like second base, corner, outfield types like you're wanting. Ezekiel Duran entered the top 10 of their top 5 of their farm system last year. We talked a little bit about that during the season anyway. But say you get a corner outfielder with some serious pop, like a Duran, and maybe a starter or starting pitcher who hasn't been able to grasp it in the majors yet. Say you get like a Dane Dunningback who has a lot of MLB service time left on his deal, and then maybe another lottery ticket down here. Say another second base, corner, outfield type like. Foskew's experience, who's been tossed around the outfield a little bit. Dustin Harris was a dynamic power hitter last year in the Rangers minor league system. He could be an option for you, but something like that could be in the offing. I'm not saying the Rangers would go for a guy like Pablo Lopez, but they're not just looking at the free agent market for starters. They could look to a guy like Pablo Lopez if they wanted to go to the trade market. So, yeah, just looking at your comment there, they're both 18 years old. They won't turn 20 until 2024. Okay. They're very young. I understand the whole world, everybody thinks the world of their prospects. But just look at the Ranger system here. I've got pulled up on the screen. Josh Young, I think, is going to be a superstar level player in Major League Baseball. We saw the power numbers hit last year. Struggled towards the second half of his call up anyway. But he should have a full season in Arlington for the Texas Rangers. He's going to have his up and downs moments in his first full year of Major League Baseball, as all players are going to. But just look at this top 10. These are the starters that the Rangers really were counting on coming into last season anyway. Jack Leiter, they think, could be an ace of their roster or ace of their staff going forward. Owen White, another guy who's had a lot of success recently because he's finally healthy. Brock Porter, one of the top arm overall in the draft last year. They got as a steal, and I believe I can't remember the round. Was it the 5th round? I can't remember the round exactly anyway, but they got him later on because they saved a lot of money with their draft picks that they chose college signings, etc. Kumar Rocker, a guy they viewed as a top overall or one of their top options in the previous draft. They got him in this with the number 3 pick in the last year's draft as well at a discounted rate that allowed him to go for a guy like Brock Porter. Cole Winn had his back up a little bit over the last couple of years. That talent or that success that he showed 2 years ago wasn't quite as prevalent in AAA. So maybe coming into AAA this year, if he has that great level of success, we might see him in Arlington sooner rather than later. But just look at their top 10. How many of these are starting pitchers? How many of them do you think will hit? all of these were once viewed as guys who should be at least a 2 or 3 level starter in Major League Baseball. I would say they would be lucky to have 2 of these guys be a number 2 or 3 starter right now in the majors. If they get one of them to be an ace, if any team gets any prospect to ever become an ace level pitcher like a DeGrom, like a Scherzer, that's great for that organization, but it is not common and it does not happen for every organization. It certainly doesn't happen for every organization routinely. So when you're looking at prospects, take every prospect that you see with a grain of salt. I really like the Rangers prospect pool when it comes to starting pitchers, but you see what they're investing in free agency, starting pitching, and that's with a whole bunch of starting pitchers right on the cusp of coming up to the majors. They want them to be able to compete and prove themselves in the minors first before they become major leaguers. That's why they're going to fill out their rotation with at least a couple of starters this offseason. They still have John Gray under contract for 3 more years. They got Jake Odorizzi on a 1-year deal, of course, with that player with the player option that he picked up this year. So there should be an opening at the back end of the rotation if one of them overperforms. But they're going to have to prove it, and they have a lot of good young arms that are close to being major league ready. But they're going to have to prove it. They're going to have some starters who were on the roster last year who aren't going to be able to make the cut this year for the team. Dane Dunning is one of those guys who they viewed as a top prospect when they made the trade for Lance Lynn. He may not break camp with them next year. He may be a guy who's spun off to a team that's looking to rebuild and try to get a good, controllable, younger starter and see if they can maximize that potential out of him. I don't think Dane Dunning will ever be an ace. I don't think he'll ever be a 2. I think there's an argument to be had that he could be a 3, but at this point I think he's more of a 4 or 5. Well, I don't think it's that much of an issue anymore with Texas. Texas really hasn't been able to develop pitchers since like the mid-90s anyway, when they traded all the pitchers that they did develop. Don't ask me why they did that. There was 5 or 6 starters that they had in their organization at one time. If they had just kept them in the organization, they would have had a top 5, top 10 starting staff all the way up into probably the early 2000s anyway. But they decided to let those guys go, and ever since then, they've struggled to find routinely good starting pitchers, even ace-level starting pitchers. Like I mentioned, it's very difficult to find those level of pitchers. Think back to the days when they developed Kevin Brown. There was a good young pitcher that, until they got rid of him, Aaron Seeley, when he went to the Mariners, if they had just kept him in-house and allowed him to continue to grow and not stunt his growth by sending him out of the organization, they would have been better served. Kenny Rogers started with the organization, left, came back. They've never really been able to handle starting pitching. And part of that was due to the heat in Texas, the ballpark, all those kinds of things. Those are no longer an issue. In case you're wondering, the ballpark in Arlington, the Globe Life Field where they play, is a pitcher's park nowadays. They've done everything they can to make it more pitcher-friendly for them, and they've changed the way they're bringing up their prospects. We saw the regression that they had last year, so obviously there's still ups and downs in every team system. But I don't think you can really group these teams the same way as you may have 10 years ago, because these teams have changed a lot as to what they want to do. Do you think the Rangers would give up Josh in a trade for Pablo Lopez because they have Corey Seager at third base right now blocking him? No. I would think they would ask for Pablo Lopez plus change if you wanted Josh Young. Not a lot of change, but for a good, controllable starting pitcher, and as highly as the Rangers right now view Josh Young and their organization, not a prayer of that happening. I don't think you could get Jack Leiter straight up for him. There could be an argument for pretty much any other player on this roster that you could make a case for them. I think they value Kumar Rocker too much internally to where he's valued too much to where other teams won't see him nearly as valuable. Brock Porter might be a good headlining piece to go to another team if they decided to trade for an ace-level starter. Pablo Lopez is not an ace-level starter. He's a good 2/3, which is why I think the trade package should reflect that. All right, yesterday we kind of played around with a site called baseballtradevalues.com. Now, we kind of showed you the trade boards option anyway at the top. Get this ad out of the way. Kind of gives you an idea of what people are thinking as far as just fans and what could happen in the offseason, what kind of trades they'd like to see happen. But if you guys ever want to post a trade to me, try to use this site first just to see if your trade actually makes some sense as far as value. Send it to me and I'll see what we can see if we can put it on here and kind of go over it. I know one of you guys, like Anthony just a minute ago, posted or sent us a trade request about the Orioles and Marlins anyway. We went over one yesterday with the Marlins and Yankees anyway. So if you guys have any questions, a trade that you'd like to see, go ahead and send it to us and we'll go over it. One thing I wanted to kind of do today is I wanted to touch on the Cleveland Guardians. There's a little bit of news coming out of the Guardians that they are going to look to trade one of their starting pitchers. So we'll see what happens. So we'll sort by team just to kind of see what offers guys are coming up with and just see if any of these make sense. Well, they did kind of empty out their prospect system during the trade deadline season anyway for Luis Castillo. So I don't think they have the prospects to be able to get it done. I think they'd have to pull from their major league roster, and I don't think they want to do that, at least until they sign a few guys in free agency. As far as starting pitchers, they already have 4 very good starters. If they sign Senga, that'd be 5. They still have Chris Flexen and another starter that they could spin at the back end of their rotation. I don't think the Mariners are the team that you want to offer Pablo Lopez to. Alrighty, so one of the options anyway, as far as starters they could trade, was Zach Plesac. There was a couple of rumors about a year ago that Zach Plesac could be out along with Mike Clevenger. Obviously, they chose to move on from Mike Clevenger. I don't think this is a great option for either team, just looking at the trade here, Brock Porter and Sam Huff. This is definitely more of a Guardians tilted trade anyway, but Plesac would be the starter in this level deal. I don't see that happening. One thing I kind of wanted to touch on, though, was the Shane Bieber rumors. He's been the guy that's most in the rumors as far as where he could end up going. Still has a little bit of control. He's no longer the Cy Young level pitcher that he was a couple of years ago. But teams, when they look at the Guardians, always see that level of starting pitcher as their ace. And Shane Bieber, while he still has some value, I think they might try to capitalize on it this year. Looking at this trade here, has Cowser, which we just went over, Austin Hayes and Kobe Mayo. The trade here looks fairly even. Josh Naylor, anyway, going the other way as well. A little kind of a power bat. I'm not sure if they'll go that far, including the bat of Naylor, because I just think he holds a little too much value for the Guardians right now. And I don't think the Orioles really want a bat clogging up their DH like that in their lineup, at least for right now. I think they're going to look for more of cheaper options, free agent options, maybe even bringing back Trey Mancini. But I just kind of want to touch on, there's going to be starting pitcher trades out there, and Shane Bieber could be one of them. Apparently, the Mariners are the favorites to land Ohtani in free agency. Well, Ohtani is going to be a free agent next offseason. For those of you wondering, it seems like the Angels GM at least said publicly that they're not going to trade him this offseason. I think they're crazy for not having done it last offseason or at the trade deadline this past year. I think they've missed their window to really capitalize on his value. He has 2 superstar level players in one, a starting pitcher, ace level starter, as well as a middle of the order slugger, DH type of player. And he should command one of the biggest trade packages in history of baseball. Even with 1 year left on his deal, he's still going to command a hefty trade package. You remember years ago with the Chicago Cubs trying to end their curse and their years-long streak of not winning the World Series. They made that big trade to get Aroldis Chapman from the Yankees. They gave up the number 1 prospect in their system. Even some people out there considered him the number 1 prospect in the game in Gleyber Torres, in addition to 3 other prospects in that deal for a half-year rental of Aroldis Chapman, who ultimately ended back up with the Yankees a half season later. That's the level of trade package that we could see for Ohtani, maybe even more, just because of how talented he is and how good of an impact he's going to have on your team. The question, of course, for him is, can he stay healthy? That's been the issue in his career so far. He's been able to stay healthy relatively over the past couple of years, but you always got to wonder with the starting pitcher and with the bat, kind of doing both sides, is he going to be able to do it for 162 games? He hasn't been able to stay healthy for a full season. He's missed a few starts or a start here or there. But still, very good players, should be able to command a healthy trade package. But like I mentioned, they missed their window, in my opinion. I think they could have gotten a massive trade haul, 6, 7, 8 prospect type of package anyway for Shohei Ohtani. Maybe they would have packaged in a couple of bad contracts in the deal just to try to ship off some money as well. And the Angels really could have reset their organization. They missed the boat, though. They didn't get the trade done, so that's why, I think the Angels really need to do some soul searching and figure out what they want to do, who they are as an organization, and realize, hey, we got the Astros in our division, who are obviously the kings of the division for the past 6, 7, 8 years. They will remain as such until they're proven otherwise. The Mariners are up and coming. They made the wild card. They are a really good team last year. They are up and coming as well, have a solid rotation. Are right there in the top 5 as far as best starting staffs in all of baseball right now. The Texas Rangers invested heavily on offense the past offseason. They lost a whole bunch of one-run games anyway, and are now going to invest heavily in the pitching side of the equation. It's no longer going to be like a $21 million payroll for the Rangers after they pared it down so much anyway, just to be able to get those premium players in. Now they got their premium players on offense. They need to add an ace to that staff. I still think they need to add a closer as well, and then bring back Martin Perez or add another starter as well, and then we could really consider them to be in wild card contention as well. And if the Astros take a step back, now that they've lost James Click as their GM, maybe the Rangers, maybe the Mariners overtake the Astros for the division lead. But no, I don't think Ohtani's going to be able to go to the Mariners as far as free agency next season either. I think he's probably going to be destined for either the Yankees, the Dodgers, or the Padres if I had to put money on it. Mariners, I think, are probably the fourth or maybe even the fifth team, depending on how much money is left over for the Rangers to spend. Now, remember, the Rangers are expected to add between $60 and $75 million in payroll. They could save some of that and go for a third dip and spend a lot of money in next year's free agent pool as well, as they'll have some more money coming off the books as far as those longer-term deals that they signed in the previous John Daniels administration. But if the Giants have a lot of money to spend out there, they could be of interest to him as well next offseason. They could save some of their money because this free agent class is very top-heavy. Outside of Aaron Judge, Jacob deGrom, Carlos Rodon, and the shortstops, there's not much left there for as far as high-end level talent. And so there's going to be teams left with some money that they're going to have left over for the Ohtani sweepstakes, and I don't think the Angels are going to have a prayer because Ohtani came over to the States in order to compete for playoffs, be able to compete against the best talent in all the world, and hasn't been able to really do that ever since he's come over to the big leagues. He hasn't performed in a playoff series, and I think he really wants to be able to do that, and hasn't been able to so far with the Angels. He's going to look for the best payday, obviously, but I think it's also going to be about the playoffs for him, just like Carlos Correa took a big payday with the Twins, didn't make the playoffs. If they had at least made a wild card, I think the Twins would have a respectable chance of keeping Carlos Correa, but because they didn't, even though they have the money available for him, there's no way I see Carlos Correa going back to Minnesota, and that's kind of what I see with Shohei Ohtani. Even though the Angels are going to have all kinds of money to be able to keep him, I don't think there's any way they could convince Shohei Ohtani that they are a playoff team going forward because they haven't been able to do it while he and the other best player in the sport, Mike Trout, were on the same roster. And they've spent money to try to make it happen and just haven't succeeded. Alrighty, but as far as starting pitchers on the market, we mentioned Shane Bieber as well. Pablo Lopez was another starter on the market. There's a lot of teams out there that could have some starting pitching available. We touched on the Mariners. They have some starting pitching at the back end of their staff. Let's look at some of the, let me look at the trade simulator just so you can kind of see their roster. There we go. And majors. Okay. All right, Kirby and Gilbert obviously are the two starting pitchers that are their 3 and 4 in their rotation. Of course, the Castillo money, even after that big contract extension he signed, he still holds a lot of positive value for this team. Even after that big trade that they made, they kind of gutted their farm system to a certain extent anyway. That's why I don't think they're going to be able to make big trades like a Pablo Lopez trade. I think that's more of a luxury item for them. They still have a couple other starters that they could turn to. They have Brash, a good young starter. They have Swanson, who's performed more of a bullpen role in recent years. They have, what was the other guy I was trying to think of? Flexen was the guy that Jerry Dipoto mentioned by name at his press conference today. There's been a lot of interest in him. There's obviously still a lot of room left on his deal. He has 4 years left of control on his contract anyway. I think that's what that is. Yep, 4 years left of control on his deal. And then, of course, they still have Sheffield on their roster. 4 years left of control, but not a lot of production there. More back-end starters that they could send out via trade. And then, of course, the top end, or the money that they've already spent, contracts that currently have negative value according to this site. Robbie Ray, they spent all that money on last year, is going to be on this roster for another 4 years. And, of course, Marco Gonzalez is one of their other back end of the rotation options that they have. A good starter there. I just don't think he's going to be on the roster come opening day. So if you're looking for a guy who can eat some innings, maybe you call the Mariners about Chris Flexen, about Marco Gonzalez, about Justice Sheffield, those type of pitchers. But if you guys have questions about starting pitchers or the trade market, send them to us. We'll wrap up here in about 5 or so minutes. If you guys want to send your questions to us, we'll see if we can answer them for you. Stick around for you guys. just to kind of give you guys some news and notes for tomorrow. Tomorrow I get off a little earlier, so we will actually do a game for you guys tomorrow evening, in addition to our baseball roundup anyway. Trying to see which games we have. Looks like we were going to do the Canucks, and I want to say the Maple Leafs game tomorrow. The Blues play, I can't remember as well, at 9 o'clock. So we're going to do some hockey for you tomorrow after we do our baseball wrap-up show anyway. We'll also try to do a little bit of football for you guys. I was going to try to do one today, but unfortunately business ran long. So as I mentioned, if you haven't hit the like button or subscribe, please do so. It helps us eventually be able to do this full-time for you guys. So the more you guys like and subscribe, the more I can do this type of thing for you guys full-time and focus on it with all of my time, as opposed to every second I can to try to look at my watch, check the updates, those kinds of things, and then eventually put out some short videos for you guys. I haven't been able to get those out for you, unfortunately, this week. We'll make those tomorrow evening since I get off a little earlier, but we'll do our MLB Live for you guys probably around 5:45, 6 o'clock in the evening, and then fold into the NHL coverage for you guys as well, kind of update you guys on what's happening around the league. Jake Ottinger is back for the Dallas Stars. Charlie McAvoy is back for the Bruins. Players are getting healthy. The Stars game was getting competitive just before I logged in anyway. They were getting beat by San Jose 5-2, I believe, at one point. They had shortened it 5-4, and with like 8 minutes left in the game, I hadn't seen if they had actually won or lost yet, but I'll check that score here in just a moment. But we will be doing some hockey coverage for you tomorrow. I believe it's the Canucks and Maple Leafs. I can't remember who they play, though. It's the Canucks game, but I can't remember the opponent. And then the Blues at 9 o'clock after our MLB Live that we're going to do for you guys, 5:45, 6 o'clock. But thank you guys for joining us here tonight. We will have some NHL coverage for you tomorrow. We'll do some football coverage for you on Sunday. There's a lot of Odell Beckham Jr. rumors out there right now. I think he probably signs after this week's slate of games, just because that way you can kind of see where the teams kind of stack up. I think the Cowboys, if they win against Green Bay, I think there's a better chance than not that Odell Beckham Jr. signs with the Dallas Cowboys. There's just way too much smoke for that to not happen at this point. OBJ is talking with Cowboys players pretty much every single day through the social media as he's trying to be recruited by these other teams. Teams are viewing Odell Beckham Jr. and seeing his impact that he had on the Rams last year and seeing that impact, and they want that on their roster. The Dallas Cowboys have made no secret about that. It started with Jerry Jones saying, hey, he admires what he's done, how he's turned his career around. Then it started with Micah Parsons and Odell Beckham Jr. kind of talking back and forth. CeeDee Lamb got involved. Ezekiel Elliott got involved. Today, Stephen Jones got involved as well. It's all through the media. They're all talking back and forth openly. And they're actually having conversations. You can actually see those conversations on Twitter if you guys want to go over and check out those. But I think it's going to, if the Cowboys win against the Packers, I think that solidifies their chances of getting OBJ. He wants to go to a winner, and I think he wants them to kind of kick the door in finally on the Packers and knock them out of any real chance at making the postseason this year and show that they're over those type of issues that they've had in the past in Green Bay and show that that defense is just as good as advertised and can continue against one of the game's better quarterbacks. Now, Green Bay hasn't played well this year. They should win that game quite handily, in my opinion, even though the game, I believe, is in Green Bay, if I remember correctly. But that might be one of the games we do for you guys on Sunday. If you guys want us to do the Cowboys and Packers game, let us know in the chat as well. You can send us a message on any of our videos. If you have a question about fantasy football, I know a lot of you guys gave me grief about my Leonard Fournette take at the beginning of the season. Now he's having arguments as far as playing time with Tom Brady and through social media as well. How often has that worked for any player having an argument with Tom Brady through social media? Zero. How many times has that worked for a player arguing for more playing time with Tom Brady? Zero. So we should have a great slate of games for you on Sunday. Yeah, I agree. Mariners are not getting Ohtani. I think that if I had to pick, they would probably be 5th, 6th in sweepstakes for Ohtani. They might be the mystery team at the next year's winter meetings. But like I mentioned, the Angels missed the boat as far as trading him a couple of years ago. I think that's when they should have had it done. But thank you guys for joining us. Again, we'll see you guys tomorrow evening at about 5:45. We'll try to get on as early as possible. If I get out of work earlier, it will be earlier than that. But appreciate you guys joining us for our 3rd straight night of baseball coverage as the off season. Hit a little bit of a slowdown today. Got a little bit more contract notifications anyway as far as what happens with Clayton Kershaw, that he's going to sign that 1-year, $17 million range deal. with the LA Dodgers. The Rangers get to free up a little bit of money that they don't have to set aside for Clayton Kershaw if he had decided to go to Texas, and can invest that fully in their offseason this year as opposed to setting aside last year as well. But they have some clarification. Thank you guys, and we'll see you guys tomorrow night.